Hello, you're on stream.
I saw all of it happen right after I watched your video. And
Hmm.
honestly, I've told a friend of mine this. I didn't even fucking notice an issue. And I think it's because I'm just so used to your reviewing style at this point that I know what you mean by what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, but then I was like, oh, right, normies. They'll share the soundbite
I
of
don't
you
I don't
reviewing
know
shit
if it's
without watching it.
normies. I think it's just people that are already uncharitable towards me. Because in terms of like what I was responding to in the YouTube comments section, there were like barely any comments. But I felt like it was worth addressing since I had criticisms against that same sort of thing last year. Um, when I was doing my Oscars roundup or whatever, I skipped Promising Young Woman after the first, I don't know, half an hour or something, and people were like, "No, you have to watch the rest of it." Blah 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 blah. And so I was like, okay, well, if this is gonna happen again, I might as well address it in a way where I can like type up a big like, okay, here's why this is bullshit. And so I posted it on Twitter, and it was the posting on Twitter that turned it into a controversy, not really me doing it,
Right.
because the people getting mad were not
Right.
people that had watched my videos. It was people taking the post on Twitter and assuming, having the most uncharitable interpretation of it in a way where it's not accurate anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So today I
I'm pretty
talked
much
with
just gonna be
another.
listening. So.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So today I talked with another YouTuber, and by the end of it, it was a really heated conversation, but it was really funny, and it was
Oh
actually
no.
it was pretty well. It was more enjoyable than the ones I had yesterday, because yesterday it was like I didn't really feel like anything was accomplished, but in the conversation I had today, um, by the end of it, it was like I was like, okay, like I don't really consider these to be full reviews anyway. And so we were like, okay, why don't we just call them impressions? And so what I did is I went to my
I saw the meme.
yeah, I literally changed that on my channel too. Like it wasn't just a meme on Twitter. So now it's called Sundance Film Festival 2022 Reviews and Impressions, which I mean, honestly, in my own opinion, like I think that does the exact same thing as me just saying I didn't finish the movie as I'm talking about it. I don't see how that's different, but if people, I think apparently something I was not aware of is that the average person seems to have like a really hard line definition of what review is, and I'm the type of person where I'm like, oh, a review can be anything because I like creativity, I like expression, I like variety. I was like, yeah, review can be anything. Like, I don't care how you define a review, but apparently, a lot of people are really hung up on the word review. So yeah, I mean, like, this is basically the conclusion at this point.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess it depends on what someone's definition of a review is, whether or not something qualifies as a review or not. Well, yeah, I guess what's like the TLDR on the position itself in terms of reviewing, or I guess talking about something that you have not watched to completion.
yeah. I think you should be able to talk about whatever portion of whatever piece of media in whatever way you want, and it's not like a moral obligation as long as you're being honest about it. The purpose of a reviewer is to give people some sort of indication of how they might want to experience a product. It's kind of like a barometer, not necessarily some sort of like hard line objective like this is exactly how you should feel about it. It's like I don't subscribe to that idea. So
Right.
like
And by the way, to be clear, I'm not like super. I'm not like vehemently, passionately against your position. I guess I'm just curious to explore the topic.
yeah, I'm like
Um,
I'm like basically done with it. So, but I mean, I'm not
right.
saying like we have to end the conversation right now. I'm good to talk for a few minutes, but um
Mhm.
Sure.
I feel like anything that could have been resolved from it is resolved. Um, it won't mean anything to a lot of people because the people who are the angriest are people that don't watch my videos anyway.
Right.
So like they won't know that there was a change that took place. They won't know that there was any kind of
Well, no, they were just there for the
acknowledgement.
dunk. That's it. They just wanted to
Yeah,
get the quick
yeah,
dunk on the
exactly.
internet and then move on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there was much interest in like, well, it's Twitter, right? I guess I'm sure that you've addressed this, but like, what is the I guess what's the goal in terms of a partial review of a film?
Because if I don't, then people will ask why I didn't cover it. Because it's when I post a partial review of a film, I don't post that as its own video. I don't go like, oh, here I saw the Batman and I reviewed half of it because I only watched half of it. Blah blah blah. I don't do that. These are the context of this is that these are in reviews where I'm reviewing the entire experience of like a festival or the entire like a category of films. So Oscar nominees video, right? Where I go through all of the goal of the video is to go through all of the Oscar nominees and share my experience with those films. An experience that I could share about one of them would be I was bored and disinterested and turned it off after 20 minutes. Here's what I thought of that 20 minutes. It could have been great after. I don't know. I wasn't willing to go through the whole thing, right? So it's not like I'm capitalizing off of it in any way where I'm making more money than if I didn't include them. They're all like the video itself is like the coverage of an entire festival or an entire category of movies. So yeah, if I made a video of all the Oscar nominees, people would ask why I didn't include one or however many, you know, if I just decided I'm not allowed to say anything about it. Or I also think that it would be a disservice to my audience. It would be a disservice to people that use my ratings to decide what to watch if I were to get so bored and annoyed by a movie that I shut it off and then not share that experience, right? That would be a disservice to the people that follow me. So
I guess the question would be, do you think that when doing reviews, in a sense, there is an obligation to impart accurate information, and that even if you accurately talk about like the first third or half of a movie, that it might inadvertently mislead people?
I don't think it's misleading if you're honest about, you know, the fact that you left it. If I leave at at minute 30, as long as I say that's when I left and I skipped through the rest of it, that's not misleading in any way. That's all of the context that anyone could possibly need for that.
Do you give them number scores though, right? Like
yeah,
the partial ones. I guess. Do you think? Well, I guess you don't think that they should be reserved for just the films that you watch to completion.
No, I don't see why not. I'm allowed to. Yeah, like guess, in the context of the video, the number is to reflect my experience with the film from what I saw, right? And then in the context of me pressing a button on IMDb, it's just for logging that information for myself, really.
So do you the number scores go into IMDb for the films that are partially watched? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess is there a concern? Well, I guess you'd recognize it's possible that you could watch a film and then the first half you're like, wow, this sucks, it's a 2.
100%.
But then
not to that degree. It wouldn't go from like a 2 to like an 8. There's so much that goes into a movie.
It would be rare. It would be rare that happens for sure.
If I didn't like the first third of One Cut of the Dead, that could be one of them. But I can't think of like another movie where the entire thing is recontextualized and by the end it's like, oh no, the bad parts were good. I don't think that's many movies.
It probably isn't many movies. I think movies tend to be pretty consistent. But you think of like Spider-Man: No Way Home. The first like third of that movie is probably like a 2 or a 3, and then the character work does a lot of heavy lifting towards the end.
It depends what you're getting out of the movie, really. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fair too, because I guess it depends on what the goal is with a number score. If a number score is just this is a representation of my general feeling about a film based on how much I've seen of it.
Yeah, honestly,
the reason why I guess I find this.
Like, I would say that the average person putting a number into IMDb that has watched through the whole movie is doing so in a less honest way than I am, honestly. I don't think the average person that puts a number... I don't think... People like, will give a 1 or a 10 just because they, just being like, oh, I'm mad at this.
Yeah, right.
Like, people review Bob shit all the time. Like, it's just...
True.
I don't really hold
Well-
so much importance to a number. The only time where I have kind of commented on that is when people have rated films before they're released, which I would say it's like if you haven't even attempted to watch it, that's not something you should do. If you do attempt to watch it, I don't see the issue. If like because the the failed attempt is a part of your experience watching it. It's a reaction that you had from the piece of media.
Yeah, no, I understand the value in that because Total Biscuit made a series called WTF Is that was a first impression series, and it was always presented as just a first impression series and not a substitute for like a review that covers the whole game. And there was value in that as a as a project.
Well,
I guess
here's why I've never made any kind of like, oh, by the way, this is why I've never felt like I needed a different word for it up until now, because apparently a lot of people are mad. The reason why is because I'm a person that posts quickie reviews and like fucking like 2.5 hour long YMS reviews, and I consider those both reviews. My definition for what a review can be is so vast. I don't feel the need to like restrict the word review into being like just this narrow thing of what it can be as a person that makes like a variety of different reviews. So I was like, okay, yeah, half review, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Like I've never concerned myself over it because I've already create like insanely different reviews in terms of like how much I engage with the film, how long I cover it, how much research I do behind it. Like, you know, it's already like what is a review on my channel. So I couldn't possibly have expected people to get so hung up on the word review being used for something that is a review of half of something, because I'm like that already. Like I just don't care.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think I probably have a similarly broad definition because an IGN review of a video game versus a Matthew Matosis review of a video game, they're both reviews. They both cover broadly the game, but one of them is much more in depth. But I don't know that I want to start making categorical distinctions based on how in depth they are. But I guess if you got such a negative reaction to this approach, do you think that you want to make any changes just for pragmatic reasons to like more clearly?
That's what I've done at this point. I've changed the titles,
right?
Because they're never contained single videos or anything. It's like Sundance Film Festival review. So now I just say Sundance Film Festival reviews and impressions. So that's what I've done. I searched for the previous Oscar nominations ones and I changed those too. So I might be missing some, but like as far as I know, that's pretty much I've covered everything. I don't remember if I skipped through any films at TIFF last year. I honestly don't remember, but
I guess how do you
actually I totally did.
In terms of like making a critique based on parts of an overall like project, whether it's a video, like in this case a film, do you think that would be that's an approach that would be totally fine if you put it on other things like video games, TV shows, but you took them in like parts that were, you know, in this like a TV show, there's an episode that's a part, but then there's a season that's a part, and then the whole show overall.
Yeah, everything. It's a real synecdoche. Everything's kind of like a greater part made to represent the whole. You know, it's in a sense,
yeah.
I mean, 'cause I was saying like, okay, well, what is completing a game? Like, if you abandon all the side quests and you just do the bare minimum to get to the end credits, like, you know, those are two different experiences. Also, you know, different experiences like 100% completionist achievements. You know, like that's a different experience.
Yeah.
A game is much more interactive, so like I don't know, people just. Whenever I try to make an analogy to help people understand where I'm coming from in the perspective of like a movie, like people just no one will accept any of my analogies because it's impossible to like make a correct one.
I think it's tough because I think video games are distinctly different. That if you play one for like 5 hours versus 100, these are pretty radically different experiences that one's getting. But the film is, I guess, just because it's shorter.
Yeah, but then if I'm doing 30 movies in a festival, It's not like
Right.
those add up. It's not just that. It's not just like, oh, one movie I'm watching this week. You know.
Hmm.
So I
Right,
have to
because it was
choose my
all at
battles,
the
and I
film
have to
festival.
be like that. I think that's an equally important part of my job as someone covering movies, is to be able to know what to pick and choose in terms of how I cover things and how much time I'm willing to spend on something. I've made the
Hmm.
argument, and I still believe this. I've made the argument that there are certain films you haven't seen unless you've seen them twice, right? It's all depending on
Yeah,
how
yeah, I
many
completely agree.
how much you're willing to engage with something. And I don't think every film that ever exists, just by its inherent nature of being a movie, I don't think that they automatically deserve your time and respect. I think that every person should be able to say, you know what, I've seen enough, and this is not for me. And maybe later they can express why it's not for them and say, this is what I thought of it. Right? That's my perspective.
Do you think that there's a distinction to be drawn between watching a film in the sense of not getting a full picture of something, that there is a distinction between watching a film partway through and watching a film once that you probably ought to watch again?
Um, I mean, only in terms of like social norms and expectations and taboos. Like I'm the
Right.
type of person where it's like, if we really break everything down, like things only have as much value as human beings place on them. Like, what's a word?
Of course.
It's a word. A swear word only has as much power as human beings give it, right? So,
Yeah.
there's no proper way to answer that question because, you know, like I said, like I think that there are certain pieces of media that do require a second watch, that even insist it, by nature of them existing. Sure, the common understanding is that to watch a movie from beginning to end is having experienced a movie. But if you get philosophical about it, like the conditions under which you experience a movie can alter your experience with the movie. There are
Yeah,
directors
we're
that
in a bad
argue that you
mood.
haven't had the full experience of the movie unless you've seen it in IMAX or whatever, right? And
Right.
so yeah, like your emotions, how tired you are, if you've had like a beer or something. Like there are many different factors other than like watching it twice or watching it halfway that can influence your level of engagement with a film or your legitimacy in terms of your experience with a film. Every time I've messed up on
Yeah.
a movie and misinterpreted it, it's been one that I've watched all the way through. Every time I've gotten something wrong, like factually about like something in a film, it's one that I watched all the way through. But you can be watching a movie all the way through. You can be distracted by if there's something earlier in the film that doesn't make sense, and then you're just on a loop thinking about it. You might miss something in the next scene because you're still thinking about like, wait, why did that happen? Blah 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 blah. Right? So like,
You may just forget.
yeah, I mean, like you can watch parts of a movie after sitting through the whole movie anyway. You can
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
go home later and only remember half the movie after having sat through it 100%. I don't think that if you only remember half the movie by the time you sit down to review it, I would consider that a part of the experience and something you could include in the review. In the same way that if I stopped a movie halfway because I didn't like it, that would be a part of the experience and something that I could include in the review. Apparently that's not a review anymore, it's an impression. And then everybody's happy now, I guess. I don't we're going to see how it goes. But
Well, yeah,
yeah, I
because
mean, just
what's changed other than the way that you've labeled it?
exactly. It's silly. That's why I don't. That's why I think this is like one of the silliest controversies ever. Is just because it's all just semantics. It's all just like none of it's important. None of it's important at all. I don't.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything morally wrong here. I've just provided my
Well,
perspective in
I
a
mean,
way
as
that
long
people
as
don't enjoy.
I feel like the most important part is as long as someone is clear that they haven't watched it in its totality.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. I
that
haven't done
point.
anything morally wrong here.
And I guess at that point, the only baggage would be on labeling, or I guess number scores. The idea that number scores ought to be. Though I
I'm
guess
a
I would
person
say,
that doesn't put a lot of weight into number scores, even regardless of whether or not I'm rating movies that I've only seen
Yeah.
half of. I don't think that a number score is the end all be all. I think people put too much importance on them anyway. So
Absolutely, they do. Number
yeah.
scores don't tell me anything. If I see something that's got a 7, what does that tell me? It doesn't tell me anything about the character work or the plotting, or if it's got a strong theme that would appeal to
Yeah.
me. It doesn't tell me anything. Other than, I guess, it's vaguely good by the standards of probably a reviewer whose name I don't even know.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm just looking at aggregate scores on
To
IMDb.
advocate for number scores, it's the quickest way to translate the most information in the simplest and
Yeah.
fastest way.
And I will say
There is
this.
no better way.
I
Yeah.
like if IMDb implemented a feature where I can say I tried watching it and didn't like it or not interested or something to that effect, then I could just use that instead of
Well,
rating it on
if they did
IMDb.
what Steam
Because
does,
that's for my
where
purpose of
Steam-
logging something, right? Like
Right.
I don't want to the amount of films that I watch, the amount of incredibly forgettable movies that I watch. I don't want to watch something, remove it from my watch list, and then 2 years later someone tells me, "Oh, have you seen this?" And I go, "Oh, no, I haven't," and then download it, and then I'm like, "Oh, wait, I have seen this." That's happened before. So that's why I
Right,
have to
okay.
log it, right? So unfortunately IMDb just doesn't have that option. And also, no, I'm not getting Letterboxd. The community there sucks, and they don't let you rate TV shows. Sorry.
But like, if that was the only motivation, you could just make a notepad, right, and put the name in. And
No,
then
because it
show
doesn't.
effort
That's
later.
all of my ratings are in one spot with IMDb. I'm not going through that effort by having a notepad that where I'm gonna Control F every single movie before I try watching it.
You make
Like,
that
no
sound like it's
way.
an arduous task.
It is. It is, especially for someone with
Might be if you watch, like,
tendinitis.
10,000 movies.
It is.
No,
You have
I'd
no
to
idea.
refuse on that one.
Yeah, like that would be a very large annoyance. Yeah.
But you search for them in your current listing, right?
No, I search for the I
You
search
have
for the
to.
title to see the film,
Yeah.
and then I go like, oh, whether or not I've seen it. But I'm gonna
So
search it up on
theoretically
IMDb either way, so that would be like twice.
Oh, right, and that if you
And I
look
would
up a film
twice
on
plus
IMDb,
me
it would
typing it into the list in the first place. You know.
I guess, but there would be a recognition then that on IMDb, if somebody were to look at your list of your reviews, there would be no way for them to be able to identify quickly and easily whether or not you watched it in full.
I would change the word reviews there to ratings. But yeah.
Right.
I don't consider
Ratings,
a number to be a
though,
review.
would be.
Yeah.
I guess if there is an awareness that can't be communicated easily to people who use your IMDb scores,
I don't think they
could there
should.
be the argument made?
I think that's on them.
Okay.
I don't it's happened. Okay, there's been enough times where I've done this to a movie, and then people were like, "No, you didn't give it a fair chance. You got to watch it." And I watch it again. I'm like, "Okay, it's exactly what I thought it was, or it's slightly worse." Like it's never like it doesn't change that far off of like what my impression is. And this has happened quite a few times. It's like, yeah, it's literally impossible to know. Like, it's impossible for me to be like, this is for sure a 4 out of 10 movie from beginning to end. I would never make that statement, right?
Surely the important question, though, is if these were films where you go, oh shit, that was actually better, would that then change your system here?
It wouldn't change my system. It would change my rating of the film. Okay. I don't think it's like a big deal to rate a number on IMDb, honestly. Because people just like nobody, the average person doesn't actually put a lot of like critical thought into it anyway.
Right.
I think that like the top 250 and IMDb in general is just like the rating system is like generally trash.
It's painful. Endgame is higher than like several fucking great films on that list, for example.
Yeah.
I think it's above Unforgiven. It's above Django. It's like, man, I don't know what I'm meant to do with this. Like, shit. What do you think that you would lose if you chose to never give number scores to anything that you haven't watched completely, and like you never even talked about the films that you watched
on IMDb or in my video?
No, I think I'd say in general. Like, what do you think you'd be losing by only reviewing films that you've seen completely?
Sorry if it sounds rude that I'm chewing. I need some calories desperately.
No, it's okay.
Well, I mean, I think that there's people in my audience that get something out of the number in context with everything else that I say, in the same way that they would for like a full review of a film. They can look at the half review and be like, okay, well, this is how much this part of the movie had, like, this is how much of an impression it left on him. You know, the difference between like a 5 out of 10 and like a 3 out of 10, they'll be like, okay, well, wow, must have been really trash for that first 30 minutes or whatever, however long, right? So it does, like, it is more information, it's more context. I just, if I thought that there was like, no, I just like, to me, yeah, it's really weird. I don't like being in a situation where I feel like I'm providing less information with a decision, right? I think that the more information I can give somebody, the better, outside of having to commit, so many hours to something where, in terms of like communicating something. If I have a feeling about something, I should be able to communicate it. That's kind of how I.
Do you think that might be erroneous though, if it's incomplete? I guess the example I'd use, MauLer and I watched the first 1.5 episodes of Peacemaker, and we stopped because we weren't enjoying it. But that show's complete now. The whole show's out there. If we were talking about it when it came out, I think we could be like, yeah, the first episode didn't like it. And then the second episode, it's like, well, I didn't like up until a point. But now that it's all done, the information that we have is, in a sense, out of date. Not because it's older, but just because there was a lot of information that we are no longer privy
obsolete
to
is what I'd go
No,
with.
I understand that. Look at the ratings for shows like Game of Thrones, The Simpsons, Dexter. Like, those are all shows that just wound up getting to shit. The Simpsons has more shit episodes than good episodes. What do people do when they rate them? They rate them based on their impressions of, like, what they've seen or what they're familiar with, or even just, like, I'm sure there's people that have seen, like, a bunch of the shit episodes on The Simpsons, and they're still rating, like, you know what, the best seasons, this is what I'm rating it on. Even though there's a way to, like, rate the individual episodes, they're still rating that, like, they've got fairly high ratings, so I have to assume that's how people are doing it. Yeah, I don't, like...
Well, usually, because with The Simpsons, for me, I would only ever speak confidently, I guess, about what I think about the Golden Age era, and otherwise I can't say anything about past, like, season 22 or 3, because I think that's might have been even earlier that I wasn't watching it anymore, so I can't say anything about that. But I can say what I think about the earlier seasons. I guess the difference would be that there is some recognition, whether in the story itself or on a meta level, that if I watch The Simpsons up to season 8, my experience of that is all complete and nothing changes. Whereas if I watch an episode up to the first act, like the first commercial break, I haven't watched it completely. I don't know where it's going to end. I really don't know a whole lot about it at all.
Yeah, but remember that this is almost exclusively reserved. Yeah, this is exclusively reserved for things that I didn't connect with anyway, so I don't really feel bad about it.
Right.
I don't think there's a single thing.
I guess,
there's no, like, single film where I don't connect with it in the first half, and then, like, if I abandon something super early, it's because it's aggressively bad. It's because it's like, okay, there's, like, this is, like, the most cancerous thing I've ever seen. The earlier I leave in a movie, the less of a chance I gave it because it was so bad. And considering that, like, if we were to draw, like, a graph of, like, I don't know, like, time spent watching the movie and, like, what its perceived quality could potentially be, right? Like, there's no movie that I'm gonna, like, truly connect with that is, like, that horrendous in the first, however long. So yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it as being, like, a big issue. I'm not. I don't really. I don't lose any sleep over potentially rating a bad movie a little bit lower than I should have.
But you do run the risk of potentially rating a film that might be great a lot lower.
I wouldn't say great.
Well, surely there has to be a world where it's possible that if you watch up
I think
to
it's
the
possible.
first
I just don't think it's very likely.
Yeah, it's probably is unlikely. I guess it's just that there would be an acceptance that is possible, but that's fine.
I think that's
Like, you're okay
as
with that
likely
trade-off.
as watching a movie from start to finish, and then just having a complete change of perspective in terms of how I viewed the film, or how I thought about the film, or perceived the film, and that being like I misinterpreted it and rated it the wrong thing, right? It's not like no one can
I
have a
guess,
perfect rating of something anyway. Like these are all just like guidelines of how your impressions and how you
But-
feel.
I guess even if we can't all be perfect, should we encourage ourselves to strive to be as accurate as reasonable with every film or video game or TV show that we cover?
If I had more respect for the ratings on IMDb, then I would. If I thought that it was like actually important to do that on IMDb, then I would do that.
That's like what would inform, because you're talking to the people, I guess, more so on anyone on the internet that strive to try and get everybody making reviews that are fucking accurate. Because goddamn, like everybody makes inaccurate reviews, and so there's a funny realization there, but also that is the fuel. Like IMDb being a place where people will be like, yeah, Endgame is way better than Schindler's List. It's like, okay. But at the same time, it's like, why can't they do that? That's their perspective, I suppose.
They're allowed to do that. I guess I just don't value that.
Exactly.
Which is something I would also.
Yeah, I don't value the average user rating on IMDb, and so in that if I were publishing something that had a bit more, you know, regardless of what, I hate Rotten Tomatoes, but let's say I was publishing my review counted for that sort of score, where I would at least have to perceive okay, like I'm actually making a difference, or like I'm actually being looked at in, you know, some sort of way where it matters. Like, I don't know, like under that context, something maybe not exactly Rotten Tomatoes, you know, if it was like a review aggregate of like critics or some sort of association, then I'd be like, okay, but this is just like I don't have a lot of respect for like IMDb ratings, and so it's my one hard rule is don't rate it before you've seen it or tried to see it. Some people would argue I haven't seen it if I haven't seen the whole thing. That's fine. I would say at least give it a try.
I thought it was funny when you would appeal in arguments to the idea that people can watch movies and forget like whole scenes in it, and is it still okay to review them? And I think one of the people you talked to was like, well, you know, maybe it's like, for us, we get really fucking frustrated with it. It's like, if you've forgotten half the movie, maybe you shouldn't review it. Because I think we're a little bit more strict with our approach. With I say we, I mainly mean myself. But like I find it frustrating when people literally like describe the movie incorrectly. Do you
think about that differently if someone in their review says, I forgot half the movie in their review? Do you think that that's like a big...
I think I'd just click off at that point. It's like, this is worthless.
Yeah,
well,
but I think that that's okay, because it gives people the necessary context and information to decide for themselves whether or not the review is worthless based on that.
I agree. It's the reason why I liked Total Biscuit's first impressions, because it was always, this is a first impressions, not a review. This is how much I've played, and based on how much I've played, this is what I think and what I expect if I were to continue playing it. Recommend, don't recommend, there you go.
Yeah.
But I think that Total Biscuit was peak example of transparency and honesty and clarity in the approach. And I guess that's interesting, because to me, Total Biscuit's perspective on a game that he has only played for some hours, probably it would almost certainly be worth a lot more to me than a decent chunk of full-fledged reviews of video games, just because his perspective is valuable.
There's an irony here that my preference would be listening to like you review the opening 30 minutes of a film than someone who is like kind of really inexperienced with even talking about movies talk about it after seeing the whole thing, because it really depends on the kind of quality commentary I'm getting. That's why I stand on like a different island with this whole thing.
Armand White exists, and he's like a published
yeah.
Like
what I was going to say though, I found interesting, right? Because you mentioned, I think, in part of this that it's not like the cinematography and production is going to have some kind of dramatic change after 30 minutes. And
generally, assuming it's like from one director,
theoretically possible that one could have that happen. But I was interested in the idea that a lot of the writing in the opening half an hour might genuinely be made much stronger once you understand like context for a lot of it beyond the, let's say, linear portion of it, like what is going on in subtext or what characters are saying, and once you find out things in the future that did you watch Arcane by any chance?
I saw the first episode. I know it's supposed to get good at 3. I haven't gotten the energy to make it to 3 though.
Fair enough. Just we can add ourselves to that list of people that tell you maybe watch the first 3 and then decide.
Well, here's the thing.
I would recommend.
I haven't rated that on IMDb because I'm leaving it open to like maybe I'll check it out at some point, right? When I rate when I rate something and log it for like a film, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this, you know. Like maybe in the future, like maybe there's a chance I could like come back to it, but I'm like it's a bit more like
I brought it up
definitive
because
for me.
The opening scene, like the prologue, is way more meaningful once you've completed the whole show. Like, it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, but it definitely wasn't until I had probably the second time after watching the show, right? And then I was like, holy fuck, the amount that's being achieved in this one scene. When I first saw it, I was just like, okay, this is stuff's happening here. I don't know who these people are or what this. And that's, I guess, what I'm getting at is that if one was to even say, hey, I've only seen the first 30 minutes and I'm saying the writing sucks in the first 30 minutes or something like that, is there still a big risk being ran that you don't even have the tools to be able to efficiently say that?
And this is exactly why it's important to communicate that you've only, like, to be honest about the amount that you've seen, because a person viewing can look at that and go like, oh, he might be missing some context. I don't want to, if I haven't like seen the entire movie, it's not my job to be like, no way, no one should ever watch any of this, you know. Like, I'm giving the movie credit by including the fact that I didn't watch all of it. I'm giving the movie credit by being honest about that, so that people who are watching my content can make their own informed decisions about whether or not to see it, or whether or not, you know, like, so yeah, like I 100% acknowledge the possibility of parts of films being recontextualized with later information. You know, not only just things getting better as they go along, but making the first parts more meaningful. That's exactly why I am honest and I say I've only seen X amount of it, right? That plays into why I'm honest and open about it. Otherwise, if not watching the rest of the movie didn't affect anything, then why would I even mention it? If I thought I could get the experience of the entire movie by watching the first 15 minutes, I wouldn't be making these statements saying, hey, I only watched the first 15 minutes. So clearly, I like, yeah.
Which would, I think a lot of people would then ask, you could just not. But the question I would rather ask is, what do you think the limit is? Would you be fine with, or would you find it a bit weird if someone said, yeah, this movie sucks, and check their review, and they say 1 out of 10. You go, okay, what's the, you know, flesh of the review, and it says way too many opening credits. I couldn't even get past them.
That's funny. I mean, like, people do that.
No, but like, I would likely be like, that's fucking stupid. Why did you even bother? I'm curious what
it depends on what format, right? Because you're describing a scenario where, like, if the review that you're doing is behind a few clicks or whatever, right? Like, you could argue that mine are because you'd have to find it through the IMDb rating or something, but I don't really consider, again, like, I don't consider the IMDb rating to like mean much at all. So it's right there in my video itself. Like, there's no, it would be impossible for someone not to have that information, because like the only place where I'm offering my review or impressions or whatever, the only place where I'm offering that is the place where I'm saying I didn't watch the whole thing, right?
I meant more so just, do you think there's still value to be gained from that person's review?
Not personally, but I would never, you know, like, I like the idea of people expressing themselves, and if that's how they want to do it, I would assume it's a troll. I would assume it's either a troll or a stupid person. But
I assume there's limits on this, though. Like, if your ideas with that actually extended to the point where many people were inspired to start reviewing your favorite films because they really like you and they start looking into them, but they'll only go as far as they stay interested. And you see, like, The Holy Mountain and Synecdoche and several others are getting these reviews from people who are like, man, I was bored. I quit.
I don't need
avoid this
other
one.
people to enjoy the movies that I do for me to enjoy them myself. If people,
True.
if people like don't give them what I would consider to be a fair chance, and I mean, as I've said before, many of my favorite movies I would consider a fair chance to be watching it twice. But at the same time, like I'm the type of person like I believe you haven't seen Synecdoche, New York, or The Holy Mountain unless you've seen it twice. But I don't want someone to watch it for a second time if they didn't enjoy it the first. You know, in the same way that I don't want someone to finish the Holy Mountain to the end if they didn't enjoy the first 30 minutes. Like, if it's not your thing, I don't want people to experience. I don't want people to feel like they're obligated to finish an experience they're not enjoying. The idea of other people rating things that I like lower because they didn't give it a fair chance is not something that bothers me. I believe it's something that already happens. Yeah, did I answer your question?
I'm also thinking out loud a lot about this because the thing is, I mostly agree with you. It's just that like I said, I sit on a weird different island about all of this. I'm not
Mhm.
concerned about your lack of watching particular parts. I'm concerned about everyone representing what they saw as accurately as they can with all the relevant information to the viewer. And at that point, I don't care. Like, it's just completely fine with me. Even
Mhm.
people who misrepresent a movie, if they say, I may get some of this wrong because this is just from memory or something like that. It's just like, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
with me,
I try to do that if I feel like I'm in a, like I think that in my new Matrix video I was like, I don't remember if they've explained this shit or not, but I'm going to ask the question anyway because it's stupid. Like, am I really, if it's not in the Wikipedia plot summary, how far am I going to dig after I've seen the movie to find out, like, for a movie that I
No,
don't
I
even like
think
really respect?
there are several mistakes I've made in my videos. I imagine you've had a similar thing where
Mhm.
people be like, "Wait, did you miss this?" And I'm like, "Oh fuck, yeah, there it is." And as far as I'm concerned, that's just a genuine mistake, and there's nothing else that can be done about that. But if
Mhm.
you try to be accurate to the best of your ability, I think there's just no way to be critical of that. You're doing the best you
Yeah,
can.
accurate to my experience, because that's what I'm selling. I'm
That's what I
not
mean
trying
by it's the
to.
best of your ability.
Yeah.
Like it's not. I don't mean you need to triple check everything you say. I
Mhm.
mean you're being 100% honest. This is what you saw. Because I'm less concerned about people making mistakes, more so how they do when they find that out.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
miss YouTube
more concerning part.
annotations because that was an easy way to make sure people
Yeah.
aren't left with the wrong information. I don't want a world where I'm not allowed to share my experience of a film I didn't finish. I don't wa- I think that is a valid experience to have watching a film. It is a valid experience to communicate about a film. Um, yeah, I like. I don't think that communicating experiences should be as restrictive. And then yeah, again, people get hung up on the word review apparently. So like, I'm fine not calling it a review.
I
Like,
think
I don't
that's
care.
where the trouble lies in terms of
If everything was
because
being
I
called
don't.
impressions this whole time, I imagine nothing would have happened.
Well, but
I
also
don't think
there is no
so.
world.
I don't think
Well,
so.
I guess
People are hung up on the number thing too. But
Right.
right. Because I guess otherwise, there's no world where someone would, where like if someone said that they walked out of a film, they'd be like, "Why did you? You've already tainted this conversation by saying that you walked out of it. You've given people an impression of the film based on an incomplete viewing. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. Like nobody would ever say that you're not allowed to share an opinion you have on something you watched in parts." As
Mhm.
long as you make it clear that you are only talking about that part
Yeah.
rather
Well,
than all of it.
my assumption, my understanding was that making it clear was just me saying that I didn't finish the movie in the video. So me changing the word to impressions, I feel is doing, in my mind, I feel like it's doing the exact same thing I was already doing by just saying I hadn't watched the movie. But I'm fine. I'm fine changing it still if it means that other people feel better about it.
Right. Because I mean,
But who knows?
I guess if you reach a point where everybody's getting mad and not pulling anything from what you're saying,
It wasn't
I
even
guess
a
at that
big
point
deal
it
until
just
I
wouldn't
posted
be
on
worth it.
Twitter. So it's not
Well,
even
I was
really.
actually going to
It's
recommend
most of it
against
is not
doing
even
that in
from my
future.
audience.
Yeah, Twitter is just a platform for dunks. Like
Yeah,
it's not
Movie
a
Bob.
platform where anybody can.
It's his home.
Movie Robert came after you.
I followed him
believe
briefly
it.
because I was hoping that he'd DM for like a conversation. And every time I opened up Twitter, because things were blowing up, I was opening it like fairly frequently, like, you know, a few times every hour. Every single time I opened up Twitter, first thing on the homepage is a new Movie Bob tweet because I was following him. I'm like, holy shit. And so I try to like find I try to find some of the tweets where he was interacting with me, and I go to his profile and I scroll down. And I'm scrolling down forever, and I realize like this is all in like an hour. He's forever, he's
Yeah.
permanently on Twitter. He's never left Twitter. It's absolutely insane.
Wow.
Well, and I thought it was really sad that he would be like, "I'm against you on this position." You're like, "I'd like to discuss that," and he's like, "I ain't gonna promote you." And then I
As
saw
he
people
quote
commenting
tweets
on it,
me.
being like, I
You're
know,
promoting
right?
me by
I
quote
saw
tweeting.
people commenting on it, being like, "Wow, YMS gone full debate, bro." It's like, guys, there is such a thing as just having a chat. We've all forgotten that, apparently.
That's
because of
true.
Twitch culture.
Although I wanted to have a conversation with Movie Bob because I know he would look stupid. That's exactly why. It's like
Oh,
he is right
absolutely
to
he would.
assume like malicious intent because I was just like, okay, this would be fun. I was hoping for something funny, is what I wanted.
I think my point stands in that people would just naturally assume that about you or anyone saying, "Would you like to talk about this?" Just like, "Oh, it's debate, bro." It's just like, that's lame.
Well, yeah, I mean,
think
like
it would
I
be
would have killed two birds
potentially
with one
productive.
stone, and I would have been able to like accurately, you know, say my feelings on it. The problem, like,
Yeah.
part of the reason I wanted to talk with him is because his tweet made it clear that he's never seen like any of the videos that he's like mentioning.
Of course he
He's
hasn't.
like,
Oh,
you can't pretend that this is like a full review or equate it to like a dissection. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't. Like, okay.
If you did, well, yeah, because it's the only what we'd be trying to identify as wrongdoing would be misleading people. That would be the problem: misleading people or misrepresenting a film.
It seems
As
like the
opposed
only
to just
reason that people should
expressing a
actually be
perspective that
upset,
you don't
but
want.
whatever.
Well, yeah, because you can't, like, the only other one would be that they are upset that you presented a perspective that they believe should not be allowed to be shared, which is a partial perspective.
Which is
Well, I
weird.
suppose
A
the only
weird
other
thing to
option they have left
say.
is that they think it's unfair to the content. or the
Which
people who made it.
I don't
know what
believe
that
in
means.
that. I don't think that I don't think that all like films deserve to be treated like
Well,
the same.
I mean,
you know?
if that's the way that it works, then it should be that when you buy your ticket and sit down in the theater, like, you know, some chains wrap around you and lock you to the chair. It's like you're here forever. Well, for 2 hours, you have to stay here. I don't even know how anybody could say that, like that you must, or that it is like a moral imperative to watch a film to completion that you're not enjoying.
Yeah.
And then if
yeah.
you walk out, that you can't say I didn't like what I saw. I
of course disagree with them, but I do feel like we're exaggerating here. They would be saying, "No, I just think that you shouldn't review it unless you finished it."
Right, so they would be saying that isn't.
I can give an impression. Like I care so little about the word review being used in terms of what I do. It's always my issue has always just been how I express myself. So if people want me to not use that word, like I'm fine. It's always for me. It's always only ever been just about expressing myself. I don't care if the word like I don't need for it to be called a review for me to like be okay with it. So it's weird that it took like 48 hours to get to that point where it seems like there's kind of a resolution. But like, damn, people are fucking crazy.
If they said like, okay, fine, no more use of the word review, and they started saying assessing it instead, like you cannot assess this until you've completed it, then all the response is just like, can I assess the parts I've seen? Then they have to argue for contextual changes, and then you can just be like, as long as I make that clear, is it fine? And you really get to a point where I don't think
impression seems to be a word that like I couldn't imagine anyone getting.
I just meant if we get rid of that word because it's like a stickler for people or whatever.
Impression or review?
You're right. No. Review. Just I don't know. I've never had a strong, definitive definition of review. Though
I've always just assumed it was just expressing yourself about a piece of media, but I guess I'm not allowed to.
So there's an irony there. I feel like I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna do it. I feel like that's too restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Restrict.
Even though the whole point is that you've made it really broad. Yeah.
It's restricting it by.
I think a review can be even more
broad.
than that theoretically. If I were, and I'm not saying this because I'm me, but if I were to make a channel that was like, I will only talk about whether or not things logically follow in this. I'm not going to give you my perspective at all. And it's as robotic as you could possibly imagine. At that point, is that a expression of your feelings about a thing? But is it also about is it a
I
review or
mean,
not?
philosophically, technically, it must be. Like if we're going like purely philosophical in terms of like
Well,
what it
is it okay?
like
Is it
our brain
still,
interprets
if you
senses, and
describe what it
our
is?
interpretation is then given back out to the world, even if like the senses, even if we're gonna say like I am objectively holding a Blu-ray copy of Speed Racer right now, like it's still like it's I don't know if I'm in a simulation or not, right?
If you're gonna make it that broad, though,
That's why I said
then yeah, I guess
philosophically,
so,
yeah.
'cause that means it just there's no winning that definitionally,
Yeah.
I suppose. There's just, yeah, like everything we say or express in any way, shape, or form becomes that of a personal expression. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, yeah, I don't believe in any sort of like philosophically, I don't believe in any sort of like true objectivity.
Not even just
Not to say
as
that
simple as
something
like,
can't be more objective than something else.
well, just like you don't believe there is an objective reality, as in like stones and planets and just stuff
No, I'm
exists.
in principle. In principle, there's no way of like confirming that. So believe is a weird word because I would say that I
Hmm.
live my life under the assumption that there is an objective reality, right? But believe is like, I guess if I were to say, am I 100% certain? I would say no, because I don't believe that's something I can have.
Well, if you've got the modifier at all times, if we could be in the Matrix / we could be a simulation of, like, we're not even in the Matrix, like we're literally a program being ran. I guess so, because we can never undo that potential.
Yeah, I don't live my
Um,
life that way, but I mean, it's a
but if
possibility
I
that
think,
influences how I
yeah, we would
phrase
just
things.
engage an axiom at that point, right? We'd just be like, taken, we aren't in the Matrix / another thing that disables the chance of anything being more real than it appears to be through testing and our senses.
Hmm.
You don't want to call that an objective reality, but I'm assuming you operate as though that is the case.
I'm assuming that everything I feel is real is real.
Yeah.
That's
In which
otherwise
case, at that
I
point,
wouldn't be
you
able
would
to
see
do
the
any.
difference between a review where someone says, like, I felt really fucking bored, or I felt incredible when versus someone who goes, Batman has been portrayed
Yeah.
without his legendary gadget,
Well,
blah, 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 from this
here's
comic.
something to think about philosophically: is even if we don't go with the there is no objective reality, have you considered that what you say about something, even if everything you say about the film is objective, there is room for a personal element in terms of how much of something you include, everything you omit, right, can say something about. You can tell essentially the same story in two different ways where both are completely objective interpretations of a story. And depending on what parts you include or what parts you focus on or what parts you spend more time on, you can frame things in a way where people might be left with like completely different versions of events. That's kind of how like propaganda works sometimes, right? In terms of like
Yeah, for sure.
news media, right? So you can say that even if you're being completely objective about what you're describing, that the personal element is brought out of how you are choosing to cover what you don't have to say something subjective for your objective statements to be part of a subjective experience, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It's just we would still at that point probably not categorize it all the same. We would probably go with the person who is saying, I felt this, I felt this, I felt this, strictly talking emotions with each act in a general broad sense, versus someone who breaks them down scene by scene, describes character names, motivations, build-ups, A to B stuff. I would probably feel like saying, if you said that they're both very subjective reviews or whatever, I'd just be like, I suppose it's just that you're getting different experiences entirely from these two points of view. One, that it really matters more that you know the person saying all of this so that you can get information from it, while the other, you don't even need to know who they are as long as they're telling the truth.
Yeah, it depends what you're getting out of it. It depends what the purpose of a review is at that point.
Because I see it all as an ideal. We strive to be accurate. I don't know there's anyone in the world who's like, I wish I wasn't accurate when describing movies. Like, okay. But even still, if that was that, they could strive to be worse than they are or whatever. But I don't think there's any sense of a perfect review or a perfect retelling or and as you said, like leaving pieces out for sure. It's I think the further you dig down, the harder it gets to point out a more personal bias. As in, like I said, Heath Ledger played the Joker was my personal bias. It's like, well, in the way that you said it, you sounded like it's a positive thing, not quite a neutral thing.
Yeah, I think that even like objectivity exists on a spectrum, if that makes sense.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, that might surprise you. I don't know, but I agree.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, in terms of like a review, like I would never say that like every review inherently has to be for the purpose of expressing your experience with a film. Right. A review can be
Oh, right,
anything.
that's
I
what I'm
don't.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's what started this. A review can be anything, in my opinion. You know, as long as you are making some statements about like something, you know, like a review can. If we're reviewing a film or reviewing a piece of media, you could making some sort of statement about media. I could like I don't personally. I said earlier, I don't consider a number rating to be a review. That would be for my own standards. Like I don't consider my number rating to be my review. But I could say if somebody wanted to create a YouTube channel, just being like my review of this, and they're like it's just 5 out of 10, and that's all they say about it. Sure, it would be silly, and it might just be a joke meme channel or something. But I would never be like that can't be a review because it's like a tech in the same way that I'm willing to in how I phrased myself of objective reality, right? I'm generally a type of person that avoids making like very absolutist statements. So that
I totally understand why.
Yeah.
And yeah, all I would I guess I ask, this comes up quite a bit for us on EFAP, but like if I reviewed Batman and Robin the way I've been doing TFA, I don't see how anybody would conclude that I must fucking hate that movie. But I'd be like, no, I actually love it. I think it's hilarious and fun and all this other stuff. But I do think it's like poorly put together. In the same vein, we were asked, I think yesterday or the day before, like what are the movies that you think are really well made but just don't do anything for you? And one of the examples I gave was Godfather. I recognize how well crafted the film is. I just don't get anything out of it. And the first response I got was like, "How can you possibly say that Godfather isn't good?" And I was like, "I didn't." And that's kind of why I value an attempt at separation, at least to try. I feel like it improves the conversation at least to some degree in trying to get across how you felt versus what you saw was there and recognized. And sometimes you can do a mix of both. Sometimes you do more than the other. All reviews are different. I can totally understand and respect it.
I would say that there is value in making that consideration for sure.
Best of luck with whatever else happens next. I'm sure it'll be nice and chill now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure at the drop of a hat, everyone will be very nice to me on Twitter now.
Yeah, your time as being dunked on is mostly ending. So
yeah, flavor of the week.
People move on to something else. Exactly.
Yeah. I think Vosh and ContraPoints are mad at each other. So
yeah,
I'll just let that one
mad.
happen. And
blocking has happened, if you can believe it.
Yeah, I'll just
drama.
Allow someone else.
I'll just scroll away into the corner and
back to the editing dungeon.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
For me.
Right. Bye.
Bye bye. Because I received the same criticism last year with the film Promising Young Woman, which was not good even when I did finish it. Big surprise.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the same thing happened last year, and so I was like, okay, well, why don't I just I'll make a big comment, which I did. I expressed myself, from what I believe to be pretty clearly and without much room for misinterpretation, but whatever. And then, I posted that comment on Twitter, just being like, okay, in case you have this issue, then here's why I do this. And I think the overwhelming majority of people in my audience agree with me on this. because it wasn't,
Okay.
it was like even in the YouTube comments, it was like pretty far down. I had to like scroll to find it anyway. And then yeah, just a bunch of people from film Twitter who are upset that nobody reads their Letterboxd reviews. I only talk about the parts of the movie that I've seen. I only talk about the things that I've experienced. I don't make statements about the entire film experience after only having seen parts of it. I talk about the parts that I've seen. Whereas these people are literally talking about something they haven't seen. They haven't seen the video. They don't watch my channel. They're not following me. It's like, very few people taking issue with this are people that actually watch my content. There's people being like, this person deserves no respect in the film community. They're calling me a fraud, which, I mean, if I was doing something fraudulent, it would have to be like if I were pretending that I had seen an entire film when I hadn't. That would be fraudulent, but I've never done that. The moral authority is coming from people saying you shouldn't be talking about things that you haven't seen because you would misrepresent them. But I don't. I talk about the parts that I have seen. And these people are talking about something they haven't seen. Like, they're jumping in on a Twitter thread without actually they don't even know which one of my videos I'm talking about. Like, they're treating it as if they're misrepresenting it to the point where it's clear that they don't even watch what I'm doing. Like, some of them were like, how do you even make it clear in your videos? Like, what do you even do to make it clear that people that you didn't finish it? It's like, if you're asking that question, then you haven't seen one.